Om Shri Sai Ram. Poetry is soothing to our lives. The great nature poet William Wordsworth says, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of tranquil emotions. When we live our life in this mundane world, we often get tensed out or stressed out. And when we read poems, it brings tranquility, it soothes our mind, it calms our mind. Because these poets, they are neither ordinary nor too divine. They are in the juxtaposition. And poems offer us a lot of relaxation from the daily rigmarole or daily routine kind of life which we are living. I would like to read out, or rather narrate, recite one beautiful poem of this great nature poet William Wordsworth. He was passing by the fields and he sees a small girl reaping and singing by herself. And he was so impressed by her because she was so courageous and brave, and all alone she was there reaping, that he was inspired by her, and these spontaneous, these words came out spontaneously from his heart. The poem goes something like this. Behold her, single in the field, yon solitary highland lass, reaping and singing by herself, stop here or gently pass. Alone she cuts and binds the grain and sings a melancholy strain. Oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. No nightingale did ever chant more welcome notes to weary bands of travellers in some shady haunt among the Arabian sands. A voice so thrilling never was heard in springtime from the cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas among the farthest he breeds. Will no one tell me what she sings? Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow for old, unhappy, far-off things and battles long ago. Or is it some more humbly familiar matter of today that has been and may be again? Some natural sorrow, loss or pain that has been and may be again. Whatever the theme the maiden sang, as if her song could have no ending, I saw her singing at her work over the sickle bending. I listened motionless and still, and as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore, long after it was heard no more. The last two lines are very significant. He says, the music in my heart I bore, long after it was heard no more. It is the sensitivity that the poets want to drive in for all of us. We must become sensitive to nature, to everything. We must do everything consciously. And if we are sensitive to everything, we are in rest forever. We are at rest, whatever we may be doing, always, all the while. Well, coming to the actual topic about one more poem on which we would like to dilate upon. Well, I said poets are so sensitive to nature. They are inspired by everything under the sun, be it the infinite blue canopy, or be it the blue infinite ocean, or the starry walls, or the infinite stretches of the sand dunes in a desert, or the endless rivers merging into ocean. It could be flowers, it could be meadows, greenery all around, forests, and anything under the sun. In fact, a poet, D.H. Lawrence, has written a poem on even mosquito. He has written composed poem on all animals, and he has written a poem on mosquito. And the way he has described A mosquito, takes the flight, comes and sits on the body and sucks the blood in such a way that you glorify the mosquito. You say mosquito is a hero. So let us today enjoy one such poem on one of the bravest animals, the tiger. And the title of the poem is A Tiger in the Zoo by Leslie Norris. Before we actually enjoy listening to this beautiful poem on the tiger, I would request you to watch this small video presentation. I will recite it once, and once again afterwards I'll recite it with the PPT. Please listen to it attentively without the lines of the poems at first, and try to figure it out, what you have understood. He stalks in his vivid stripes, the few steps of his cage, on pads of velvet quiet, in his quiet rage. He should be lurking in the shadow. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass near the water hole where plump deer pass. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws terrorizing the village. But he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. Please listen to it with the lines on the screen or with your textbook with you in your houses. He stalks in his vivid stripes, the few steps of his cage, on pads of velvet quiet, in his quiet rage. He should be lurking in shadow. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass, near the water hole where plump deer pass. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws terrorizing the village. But he's caught in the concrete cell. Alas, he is caught in the concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars. He hears the last voice at night, the patrolling cars, and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. I'm sure you have heard this poem carefully. A few questions I'm going to put to you, which you have to think it over. And I'll leave you with those questions for this session, and we'll be back to you again with the answers and discussions on the poem. Take a look at these questions. What is the poem talking about? What is this poem talking about? Is the poem glorifying anything? And if so, identify the words which glorify. Identify the figures of speech or poetic devices like simile, metaphor, alliteration, personification, refrain, etc. There are many more figures of speech, but for our purpose, for 10th class, this is a poem from the CBSE 10th class. So, at this level, these are more than sufficient. In a nutshell, if I have to say what is a figure of speech, what are these figures of speech? Simile, it's a comparison using like, or using as. For example, he fought like a lion. He fought like a lion. Here the word like is used. You are comparing somebody with lion. And what is a metaphor? It is almost the same as simile, but it is implied simile. It is more of congruence than of similarity. You are attributing one quality to another. For example, he was a lion in the war. It's not he fought like a lion. You say he was a lion in the war. That is called a metaphor. What is alliteration? Poets, they use these poetic devices quite often. What is alliteration? Same sounds in the lines of a poem. For example, he lied low. L and L is repeating here. He lied low. Pitter patter, per sound. Pitter patter is repeating here. Sometimes it could be more than 2, 3, 4, but the sound should be of the same kind. What is personification? Speaking of inanimate things or animals as a human being. When you speak of inanimate nature or animals as if you are speaking of a human being, that is called personification. For example, the melancholy darkness came and stared at me. Now, this is such a beautiful expression. You're talking of darkness, you're talking of melancholy, you're talking of sadness, and saying that it is staring at you as if a man is staring at you. So that is personification. So, answer, this goes on. Example, refrain. What is refrain? It is the line which is repeated in the poem, either at the end of the paragraphs or at some uniform intervals. So, repetition of a line of a poem. For example, there is this line, but I go on forever, in the poem Brook. It's a beautiful poem written by, I forgot the poet, but this line appears at the end of every paragraph. I go on forever and ever. So, what are these figures of speech? So, in this poem, identify the rhyming words. What are these rhyming words? Aurobindo, for example, he speaks of the importance of rhyming words, and his poems were so attractive. He says if the words are rhyming or has the same kind of endings in your pronunciation, it attracts you very much. And that is the importance of rhyming words in poems. He says, he who has created this earth must himself descend into clay and tread the dolorous way. Clay way. Aurobindo spoke of most touching lines. He used to say, supramental is a truth, and its advent is in the very nature of things inevitable. And this kind of rich or decorative way of speaking is what we find in poems. So anyway, rhyming words, same kind of endings, that is called rhyming, and there will be a rhyming scheme followed. It will be either first line, second line, the ending words will be same kind, or it will be second and fourth line. So is the poet following any scheme, rhyming scheme for this poem? What is imagery? Are there any imageries here? See, ordinarily if you read any poem, it will trigger off some imagination. That is ordinary imagination, of course. But there will be some kind of specially ornamental, decorated kind of rich imagination made by metaphorical expressions. they are called images painted by the poets, and that is imagery, an image triggered by the poet in your mind in ornamental language. For example, starry spheres. So when you think of the starry spheres, you think of the, the sky studded with star. Melancholy darkness. So you are thinking of some darkness, but it is also imbued with sadness quality. So kind of rich imagination, that is called imagery. So poets use this. And does the poem find a parallel to a human being? If so, give an example. So is there any specific example of a human being who can be resembling in this situation, same situation? Well, that's about it, because I would not like to explain word by word at this juncture, because you need to think about it, and it's for you to imagine and struggle with it for a while and try to understand yourself about the meaning of the poem. I leave you with these questions, and please think, and we will once again get back to you very soon. Thank you. Sai Ram.